Hi, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to Manitoba Seed Industry Days. I am Marc. I'm editor for Seed World Canada. And today we're going to have a discussion. I have four special people up here. We're going to talk about seed processing, seed conditioning, and traceability. And the overarching theme for today is the role of advanced technology in seed processing. Yes, we all know there's a lot of great technology going on, but to make this really timely, wanted to kind of put a really, timely spin on it. And as we're going to be talking about over the course of today and tomorrow, CSGA, a couple weeks ago in Calgary, I was at the Interprovincial Seed Growers meeting, and CSGA reinstituted two membership classes, which will allow people who aren't necessarily seed growers to join CSGA. And that means that more people are going to be around that table. And this includes people in seed processing, seed conditioning, and traceability. And so that's why this conversation today is really important. It's an opportunity for you, our audience, to bring some questions to the people up here and for them to answer those questions. And so let's dive right in. We have four panelists. We have Rod Cockerline. Rod is VP Sales for Nexeed. We have Arlin Friesen. Arlin is Assistant Manager for One Step Automation. We have Bill Rimmer. Bill is Managing Partner for Seed Tracker. And last but not least, we have Chris Hendrickson. He's Manitoba Territory Sales Manager for Can Seed Equipment. So, Rod, I just want to start off with you. Can you give us the 411 on what Nexeed does, and then a little known fact about Rod that people might be surprised to learn?
Okay, thank you, Marc. This is kind of fun. Never done this before, so bear with us. Quite a wide span of the room here to keep an eye on as well, so I hope the voice travels okay. So I got the opportunity to start into this industry as a young guy. So a few of the ones that have more gray hair than me have seen me grow up, and it's been a real pleasure to look around the room and see a lot of friends and customers. So thanks for having us. I grew up in the family farm in Pilot Mountain, Manitoba, and weren't in the seed industry, but we were a grain and cattle farm. And followed a dream to play a little hockey and baseball at a college in North Dakota. And then the bright lights of Winnipeg caught my attention, and I've been here ever since. So maybe the fun fact, maybe you don't know, I live in the RM of West St. Paul, and I'm the hockey convener and also a director for the Seven Oaks Minor Hockey Association. So this time of year, I'm actively involved in that and dealing with a lot of the great hockey parents that get excited about a lot of creative things. So that is a lot of fun. So Nexeed, we're best known as the Kimbria guys. When we rebranded as Nexeed, Marc Metcalf's back in the corner. Marc and I worked with a company, and we created the name Nexeed. And when we sent out the snail mail letter that worked back then, people said, well, you still can get Kimbria, right? Because that's what we are known as. So we're the Kimbria equipment guys, exclusive dealer for that in across Canada. We also have exclusivity contracts on the bow mill technology out of Sweden. Marc talked about that last year. And we do some milling equipment through Schule out of Germany as well. So we're equipment people. Direct sales here in Manitoba are through me. We've got territory managers across Canada. We got a guy in Ontario. We like that boots in the ground presence. So we got a guy in Saskatchewan, and we got another one in Alberta. So that rounds out the sales team. On the service side, Gary Hamilton's known by a lot of you customers in the room. We got tech support on color sorters. Rob Gusso and Bob Salnikoff are the guys on that. So I think a bunch of us probably got a notification to come pay us a visit tomorrow afternoon. I know there's some other meetings and things happening, but if you're headed west, if you're headed out of town, pop in at Nexeed in Headingley. We got some equipment on the floor that just arrived. We've got the color sorter lab with some new technology in there. So if you get a chance, pop in. If it's another week, that's fine too. But there's some new technology and ideas to see there. So again, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Rod. Arlin, I have to apologize to Arlin. I needed an extra panelist this morning, so I kind of threw a rope around Arlin in the hallway and dragged him in here. I said, you got to be on this panel. So thank you very much, Arlin, for doing this. Can you give us the 411 on one-step automation and just a little known fact about yourself, Arlin?
Yeah, nothing like being put on the spot. Thankfully, I see a lot of friends in this room. Many of you I know, many of you I look forward to getting to know if I don't already. One-step automation, our primary focus is seed processing automation. So where Rod sells you the equipment or Chris sells you the equipment or any of the other equipment guys, we're the ones who make it run and make it run well. We're the ones who are freeing up eyeballs and hands on the plant floor to prevent from catastrophic spills, all the way down to helping on a logistical end. Actually, the person who threw the rope around my neck was Bill Rimmer, because we've had some integrations with them even. So it's no longer just about making sure that, a bucket elevator is spinning. It's about you have this data in your inventory management. How does it navigate through the plant floor? What does that mean? And looking to the future, what additional information are you wanting off your plant floor? Flow monitoring, sampling, etc. These are all very current conversations that we're having. So we primarily play in agricultural automation, grain handling, seed processing. We got our start in Manitoba. We're based just outside of Winnipeg. Many of you are clients of ours already. And we branched out across from there. We've got stuff all the way up in Peace River country in northern Alberta, and are working on projects spanning between there all the way down into South Dakota. So the appetite for technology is huge right now, especially if you're looking at a investment to help your operation run smoother or diversify in the future, and what that means as far as a technology standpoint. Nothing like getting put on the spot for a little known fact about me. Okay, here's an awkward one. I'm mildly colorblind. So if you walk up to one of your operator screens and you're seeing the colors that are there and you're wondering why they were chosen by a guy who likes high visibility. It's not major, but you'd be surprised how even elements like that play a role in technology and in solutions that work for all people. And it's interesting, as I reveal that fact on job sites, the amount of people that said, oh, yeah, I have a problem seeing that too. Or I've had guys contact me after the fact and, hey, can you improve this color scheme because? So there's a certain accessibility aspect to it as well.
Thanks so much, Arlin. Bill, refresh your memory. What is Seed Tracker and what's a little known fact about you?
Yeah, so Seed Tracker is a cloud-based software platform for seed operations. So Seed Tracker basically manages complexity, helps you automate and standardize your processes, and more recently helps you get connected and grow your business online. So we've been working on Seed Tracker since late 2015. We rolled it out in 2016. We've got some customers in the room, and it's great to see you guys. Maybe some future customers too. But we've made a significant commitment to building a platform that meets the needs of operators in this industry, and we're very proud of that. Doing that right here in Manitoba. As far as something that people might not know about me, I'm from Liverpool, England originally. So if you want to talk about football or soccer, come talk to me anytime, because we're top of the league right now, and it's all good. But yeah.
Thanks, Bill.
And it's great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, Chris, give us the scoop on Seed equipment and a little known fact about Chris.
Yeah, thanks for having us all in. It's great to be here. So the quick version, Seed equipment's been around for 40 odd years, long before me, naturally. And really do a lot of competition with Nexeed, of course, a lot of friendly competition there, and on that grain processing side of things. But Seed in the last decade has really expanded the offerings. So getting into more handling systems, dryer sites, and grain storage, and then of course that further processing. Not just limited to stuff like milling, but of course malting, packaging, and things like that. So quite a wide variety of offerings from CanSeed, and the short version I like to explain to people is everything from combine to bag of flour in the grocery store and everything in between. That's for a little fact, I suppose. Some people probably already know it, but I'm a living organ donor as of about 12 weeks ago. Donated part of my liver to a friend. So still in the recovery. Everyone's doing quite well, but yeah.
Wow. Chris, I talked with Chris about this earlier. He has quite the story to tell, actually. So if anybody in the audience, for whatever reason, is interested in organ donation, Chris has a really, really fascinating story to tell. So, and he seems more than happy to tell it. So please, if anybody is going through anything or it could be relevant to you, he's the guy to talk to for sure. Thank you, everybody. I want to start off with topic of regulatory compliance. We did a little brainstorming session the other day. Well, Arlin wasn't there because, like I say, he got roped into this morning, but the topic of regulatory compliance came up. And this is something that impacts everybody in this room. Rules are evolving in many different ways. There's many different interpretations of these rules that vary by region. And staying compliant can be time-consuming, it can be costly, but not being compliant or running into problems in this area can be even costlier, as we all know. Rod, you've been on the front lines of this issue over the past year or so. What significant changes or challenges have you seen in regulatory compliance in general, and why are these proving so challenging for many of the people in this room to navigate?
Well, if I step back more than just 1 year, Marc,
sure.
Like 20 years ago, there was such a thing as, if we were going to sell that to a grain elevator, well, that needed to be XP, so explosion proof. That was new and that was hard. Well, things got a lot harder in the last 20 years for compliance. So we've adapted over the years. We started to sell some seed coating technology. Coming with that, now we're selling wires, not just iron. So that brings you into having to have CSA approval on equipment, which today is a formality, but that was a hoop we had to jump through. There was, panels and new rules that needed to be followed on the seed coating side. So we've navigated through that. Some of the color sorters that you guys have from Kimberly in the room are celebrating 10 birthdays already. That was a quick 10 years. So now we're starting to hear these terms like area classification and class 2, div 2, and these types of terms that, is it kind of like a grain elevator? So it's there's a lot more focus on that. But as an equipment supplier, as we've offered more than just pieces of iron, we've had to learn and made enough mistakes along the way that we've got some scar tissue that reminds us not to do that again. And some of the last color sorters we've installed, of course, have been our best. So the challenging part can be, on this electrical side and dust hazardous environments. It's a little bit of a moving target as to what's okay. And that's frustrating. You're saying yes, Arlin, because the interpretation of what you think is a standard set of rules isn't consistent within the province, from one Manitoba Hydro guy to another, from one office of the fire commissioner guy to another. Anyone that cheers for the Saskatchewan Rough Riders, things are even more difficult there. They can have it. But I got to deal with that too. So that's a challenge. There's a lot of really great technology out there that we would like to offer. And in some cases, we get told no. And it's costly if you get told no after the point too, which, again, that's not a lot of fun to deal with. But what we have seen that's new that I'm excited that we can bring to the market. Marc and I got to Cambria a few weeks ago, and in their test silo, there's some really neat ideas. There's cameras analyzing the screenings. There's cameras analyzing the clean product as it exits the end of the Delta cleaner. So what do we do with all that data? Maybe some other guys can talk to that, but how that's going to be integrated into these new rules of what regulatory allows, we'll find out here in Manitoba. Again, safe all other places of the world. Why not here? That can be frustrating. And I think there's ways that you can plan to do some expansions by aligning yourselves with some really good industry friends. And we know who they are, and you can get plants with the proper dust control, and you can get some area classifications written, and in some cases some declassified areas that you have to do correctly. You might have to have a fan here, some pressures there, a switch there. But again, we've worked with companies like One Step and others that can bring this solutions to it. But putting equipment in isn't quite as easy as it used to be. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, Arlin, you were nodding your head quite a bit there. So I was saying this is something that you probably deal with on a regular basis?
Yeah, absolutely. By trade, I'm actually a journeyman electrician. So this is a bridge we cross very frequently when it comes to new builds, especially. And I don't know how many in this room are aware, but by default, if you're putting up a new seed plant, even in Manitoba now, you are deemed XP rated. You are deemed Zone 20. Everything has to be explosion proof. Now, as Rod alluded to, there are ways of declassifying, and that is quite a common thing that we go through. What they can do now with dust collection systems is quite phenomenal. Interestingly, even over the last 3 to 5 years, there's been a much bigger emphasis on that, where we're seeing dust fans of larger and larger horsepower in a facility where I see Tom looking at me when he put up his new plant, and I saw those dust fans and my eyes rolled back in my head, and now I'm seeing ones that are twice that size being commonplace, simply because of what the specs are now in order to derate, to be compliant, and failure to do so, unfortunately, has expenses tied to it. You can put up a Zone 20 and explosion-proof seed plant. We've done a number of them, but everything from your lighting to your electrical fittings to the motors on cleaners are all going to be more expensive pieces of equipment. And suddenly, a hazardous engineering study is a smaller drop in the bucket than what it means from an electrical perspective. So that's the direction a lot of places are headed. Rod made a comment about sorry for those Rough Riders fans. If you are a Manitoban who cheers for the Rough Riders, my sympathies are with you, but you're actually very quickly approaching a level footing where the regulations, Saskatchewan definitely did seem to lead the pack there, but those same regulations we're now seeing in Manitoba, we're seeing in Alberta, and you are somewhat at the privy of the inspector, like he said. We see it a lot in Saskatchewan, for example, where it's not a provincial inspection authority like we have with Manitoba Hydro here. It may be farmed out by the municipality to Municode, or there's a variety of inspection agencies, and all of their interpretations are different, so you have to be careful not to run afoul. So it's important when you're planning projects, expansion projects, new builds, to have those conversations with your inspector, with your electrician, with your controls guy, even your equipment guy very early on, so you know what's required of you. It sounds overwhelming off the hop, but there are those of us experienced in this that can help you navigate that territory for sure.
Bill, you've been at the forefront of software solutions that really drive traceability and compliance, that helps with, staying ahead of regulatory matters. And what are the latest innovations as far as seed tracking goes, that can help companies really simplify those regulatory processes?
I think there's a lot of new technologies that are coming along all the time, and we talk about hype cycles and things like that. And I remember having a conversation with someone at a seed event back in 2017 about blockchain for traceability. But when you step back and you look at the industry, the easy thing to say is go digital and get connected, right? But when you look at any industry. And if you look at any industry, the rate of technology adoption varies across a given industry. So if we look at the seed industry in particular, the rate of technology, there's a whole spectrum of technology adoption in the industry, right? So people started by, I'm going to go digital, I'm going to put my records in the computer, I've got a spreadsheet. Then I'm going to get some application that's a little bit better than the spreadsheet, some generic application. Then maybe I'm going to get an application that's a little bit more seed specific or industry specific. Then maybe I'll go to the cloud. Then then maybe I want to get some mobile apps, and I can do interesting things there, tie that in. And then we can start talking about connectivity. So if you look at this industry being the supply chain, the interconnected supply chain that it is, not all the participants are at the same level of technology adoption and technology maturity. So I think it's regulators, when they're coming in and bringing in new solutions or new regulatory frameworks into that digital world, I think they've got to be really careful that whatever they do can play across all those varying levels of technology adoption. So that the guys who've charged ahead and gone fully digital, they're not penalized or held back. And the people who are on the spreadsheets and things like that aren't left behind, kind of thing. So there's a lot of technologies out there, but in a regulated industry like on the seed side, I think it's really important that the industry bodies come together and establish standards and protocols for things to enable the adoption right across the board. Because everyone had a different blockchain in 2017, but we still don't have things like that adopted in this industry today, because those regulatory frameworks or those standards and protocols haven't been adopted by the industry.
Yeah, there's a word you hear a lot: blockchain, AI. These are all words we're all hearing more and more often. Chris, for you, what's the most exciting? I saw you nodding your head quite a bit earlier in regards to some of this stuff. And for you, what's the most exciting innovation right now that's really helping businesses stay compliant and competitive as far as, regulation goes?
Yeah, so it's difficult to pin down just one, honestly. There's so many different aspects of the technologies that are coming out, and in my mind, everything kind of starts, in the field before we've even, taken it off and put it in the combine and brought it back to the yard. And to that end, we're seeing plant analysis tools and drones and things like that, where we can see and understand what's in the field before it's necessarily even mature, and being able to analyze the field at that stage of everything to make sure that if we're looking for something like a gluten-free certification, where we cannot have any gluten-containing grains in the field, let alone brought into a seed plant. That part of the technology is certainly exciting. Obviously we've got a lot of automation and PLCs and things like that, and that's also another very exciting part of the technology. It's not just limited to seed plants, but it's also becoming more commonplace. Even just in the handling, the storage, even some new. There's lots of tech coming out on just the combines themselves, where you used to have to look back and see what was in your grain cart, and now it's kind of it's automated, and adjustments are made by a computer program, which you can call an AI, but we'll get into that one a bit later, I think. But then, of course, the blockchain's been mentioned, and the fundamental core technology of blockchain is a distributed ledger technology, which has its own issues. Particularly the Oracle issue and the problem of the double spend. But when it comes to using distributed ledgers for traceability purposes, that's certainly an exciting thing that hasn't developed as much as would have been predicted. But there's certainly more and more applications coming out with that. And then, of course, my background is optical sorters, and that's kind of my bread and butter. And seeing what one that was 20 years old can do compared to one that was 10 years old, compared to 5, compared to 2 years old, and even some of the later stuff, it's leaps and bounds with each of these generations of machines. So pinning down one particular technology is a little bit difficult, because there's so many different aspects to touch on.
Sounds like to avoid problems, stuff has to work, right? I mean, you're dealing with all these different technologies. Stuff has to. I hooked up my in-laws' TV the other day. They got a new TV, and I mean, this is just a TV, but I mean, what a nightmare that was. Everybody's setup is different. Once it's hooked up, well, they want it tweaked a certain way, and I mean, this is just television set. I can't imagine a whole seed processing line. And Rod, for the people in this room that are building or retrofitting facilities, whatever they happen to be doing, how can they sort of proactively address some of these hurdles? Is there something you can recommend to sort of get ahead of potential issues?
Spend a little bit of money and make a drawing. The technology out there today isn't that expensive, and what you get as a result from a 3D model of your facility is a really, really valuable tool. I was at Imperial Seeds earlier this morning and met with someone we work with in the industry that does these drawings for us. So Kurt's making some changes, and we can all kind of envision how these indents are going to go up there, where his mezzanine is, but is left hand right? Is left hand right? What's the right configuration for the equipment? Will the angles of the spouts work? All these questions and possibly mistakes can be made on the drawing, so when the millwright comes in, he can just build it. And he's got a 2-week window where we're going to shut down and get this done. So follow the drawing, make the mistakes on the drawings, realize it's not going to fit or flow, get them all the material on order based off the drawing. It's a really, really valuable tool. And the conversation this morning, the new one I learned is this 3D scan. And my understanding of this is this device comes in and it's spinning and it's shooting lasers out, right? So if I shoot enough lasers at it, you'll get probably at the end of it millions and millions of dots. So what the dot does is give you within a 1/4 inch of where everything is in the plant. And then you get the proper software to create a 3D image. So for retrofitting, that is something that is coming. And I think a lot of value in retrofits because you'll know where the cable tray is that you really don't want to move. So that might help us imagine what it could look like fitting it in. We're pretty good at making stuff fit into existing facilities. My favorite, of course, is when we can define a process flow, put a nice row of Kimberly equipment in there and put a shell around it. But still, the value of having that drawn and the value of having that for training, for future expansions, it's a really powerful tool. And again, it doesn't cost a lot of money. I think it helps probably too with some automation, I would think, Arlin, for determining, what is my cable length? And I think the electrician and controls guys off the model can, get ahead of the curve on what might be some headaches, what might be the cost. So if you're looking at some retrofits or new equipment installations or a new plant, talk to us. Let's get it drawn up.
Yeah, Arlin, can you touch on that? Like, what role does automation play in this?
Yeah, absolutely. So that is a very valid point. And actually, I'm going to take it a step further and say, even for the trades on site doing your build, those 3D drawings, it's something we've seen now in more the last 2-3 years, I would say, where if we're brought in on a job with Rod or with Chris or whoever, the first question now is, are there 3D drawings? Can I see them? Because they can describe to me what they've sold for equipment, but I don't understand necessarily what order it's going in, where it's located. And then to have our business models, we typically work with your local electrician. So it may be someone who doesn't know what an air and screen machine is or what there is for motors on it and so forth. So to have that model that we can then sit down with them and have that discussion, okay, when I use this terminology, I'm referring to this piece of equipment and this is how we're going to be connecting it up. Another point to that in terms of, he made the comment about spouting angles. How many of you guys who have built a plant in the last 5-10 years wish that your sidewalls were a little bit higher? You get, another piece of cleaning equipment. You move from, a standard air and screen to one with bottom air, and suddenly this machine is sitting higher and you don't quite have the angle to get the proper surge capacity that you'd hoped for. And now you're compromising, the efficiency of incoming conveyors and so forth, in terms of what you can do there. So there's a lot to be gained by that little bit of spend. And when I do see it on jobs, it certainly does help it move smoother.
I think you're talking about connectivity. And Bill, this is where you come in. I was hoping you could speak to a little bit about this. I mean, things, like I said earlier, things need to work. And I don't know if you remember the golden age of computers back in the 1990s. You'd buy a mouse for your computer and you'd plug it in, but it wouldn't work. It came with a floppy disk. You had to put it in the computer to tell the computer that, oh, I plugged a new mouse in. And you don't do that anymore, right? You buy the mouse, you plug it in, everything just works. And so, Bill, you're kind of an expert in traceability tracking. And I wanted to ask you, what makes that connectivity such a critical issue right now, and where might the bottlenecks be?
Yeah, so if I step back and think about connectivity kind of holistically, I think it's me the question again?
Sure, yeah.
Sorry, just repeat the question
in terms
again.
of this idea of connectivity and making
sure.
it so that, hey, you can plan in advance so that down the road, like, you're not going to run into this stumbling block. And I was thinking something like Seed Tracker is something that can really help with that.
So whether you're investing in the kind of technology we sell, like a cloud-based software platform, or you're investing in cleaning technology or equipment technology and things like that, when you make a big investment in technology, ROI has to be there, right? You're running a business, you got to see the ROI. So when you think about ROI with a given technology, what we've learned over the last 30, 40 years in technology is that there's something called the network effect. And the network effect says that the value of any given technology increases as more things become connected to it. And in fact, the value of the technology can grow exponentially as the network of things that are connected into it grows and grows. So the most basic example of this would be something like the telephone. One telephone, not super valuable. 2 telephones, you can talk to each other. 1 million telephones, and now you've got mass communication everywhere kind of thing, right? So the network effect is a kind of multiplier on the ROI on technology. So if we bring that back to this industry, so being able to connect across systems, being able to connect across machines, and basically have that data put to work automatically for businesses can so massively impact ROI that it's super important. So I think that it's something that's why it's so important, and that's why it's so critical. It's just to maximize the value of the technology investment. It's one thing to have standalone systems, but once you can connect them to each other and they can do useful work automatically by transferring data, it's just the ROI to the business just goes off the charts.
So, Chris, I'm curious for you. I mean, advancements in processing equipment, I mean, obviously, they make these things easier, but I imagine it can make it a lot harder to plan too. And like, how do you generally advise people how to wade through all this?
Yeah. So I guess one of the biggest things is, we can have this entire network of devices that are interconnected, but if there's no infrastructure, if there's no proper regulation for these things to ensure that, every advancement that we have in this technology is ethically done, that doesn't compromise, people or the things that we're dealing with, ensuring that we have that stuff in place, the infrastructure and the regulations, it certainly stifles and can slow things down, but it ensures that everyone has an equal playing ground. And you got to have these things in order to have that communication. There's no point having a touch screen on my gravity table and the color sorter and then another computer in a room that controls all of it if none of that's going to talk to each other. We can have all these fancy gadgets, but we need that. And then of course there's additional risk with some of these things. There's something nice about the simplicity of the machine where you just pull a lever and that increases an angle of something. Sometimes more maintenance cost on those sorts of things and whatnot. But then when you get to the electronics, makes it so much easier. It almost kind of makes it idiot proof in a lot of ways with some of these things. But then there's other risks that we need to consider that aren't just individual risks anymore. Now, all of a sudden, we're looking at the global supply chain for semiconductors and rare earth metals, where supply and processing of these things is highly concentrated in other parts of the world. So we are entirely dependent on importing a lot of these things. to be able to make sure that these things run. So there's also those risks. So there's certainly a lot of benefits to be gained from technologies that are working well in a good framework that keeps it safe for everybody. But then there's also risks with these things, and the risks as time goes on, as things get made safer and safer, which is just a natural externality of these things that's going to happen anyway. There's also those things to still kind of keep in mind.
I want to turn our attention to the future a little bit. As I said earlier, CSGA has re-implemented these new membership classes. So we're going to have, more people than ever joining CSGA, being around that table. And a lot of these people will be in the seed processing space, seed conditioning, traceability. And Rod, I'm curious, as someone who works, like you work directly with processors and seed growers, and how can we foster better collaboration across the supply chain? Like, what should the people in this room be doing now to sort of better take advantage of this?
Everyone should buy more Cambria equipment. Is that straight enough, Marc?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
Nothing wrong.
That's why I'm here.
No bias at all there.
Yeah. Okay, here we go.
That's why they're on opposite ends.
Friendly competition. Arlin, how can, seed processors, people in this room, partner more effectively to drive that change in the industry? I mean, is there sort of that burning question in your mind that, hey, if we're going to make a lot of this stuff easier, like we need a certain conversation to happen, whether that's at the regulatory level or somewhere else?
Yeah. This is where it's important to get all the partners in your specific facility talking to each other. A lot of, for example, what we've developed in our software and our solutions has been motivated by quite a few people in this room actually coming to me and saying, hey, can we do this? Is my system capable of this? I have this piece of equipment. Can you talk to it? What can you do with it? You need to encourage sometimes these parties all to come to the table and share their information, because for example, Rod has a new IQ sorter. I know very little about it, and I've been asking some questions already, and I'm excited to see them in progress. I know, to Chris's credit, there's technologies in some of their sorters similar as well, and in my mind, I'm going, much like Chris said, you've got a screen now at your color sorter, you've got our control screen in the control room, and none of these are talking to each other. So what are we capable of in terms of communications between the two of these to make your lives easier? To help answer some of these questions of what if you can do XYZ with your automation to take over this manual pen and paper process that I'm currently doing now. So it's very important to ask questions of your partners in your seed processing plant, your equipment guys, your automation guys, your electrical guys, so forth, and say, are we capable of this? Hey, I had this idea. Asking questions is a big strength in that conversation.
Bill, traceability is really becoming non-negotiable right now in the seed industry. And looking ahead, how do you see your software kind of evolving to meet that demand?
We see traceability and audit trails and having the system automatically keep track of who did what and what happened and things like that. That's just table stakes, right? So I've been building software for a long time, and whether it's software we've built for this industry or the pork processing industry or stuff like that, when you work in those type of industries, pork processing in particular has massive traceability requirements as well. So that stuff is just table stakes, and you got to build that in from the ground up, and then basically have the software get out of the way with that stuff, let people run their business, and the software just automates creating the records, the audit trails, and all that kind of stuff. So I think that being able to do really strong traceability within an organization is a solved problem for if you get the right system. But the challenge then comes in is when you want to have traceability across organizations in a given industry. I think that's the challenge, and I think that's the next challenge for this industry. And then I think there's a lot of players in the industry, a lot of stakeholders who are interested in tackling that challenge, and we're really interested in that too. So, when I bring product, I ship product here, and then it gets seeded and harvested, and it comes back, it's cleaned, it goes over here, it goes over there, comes back, and it finally gets sold. Having a single contiguous kind of traceability history of that product, regardless of what systems or stakeholders it's touched, I think that's achievable. And I think that's just a matter of getting the right people together to talk about it. We don't just work in the seed industry. So if I go back to that pork processing industry that we also work in as well. That industry came together in Canada in the last 10 years. Well, maybe it's 12 years ago now. And it wasn't a government thing. It was the industry came together and created a centralized traceability database and basically had everybody sign up to it. So now whenever hogs move, the shipper reports it to that database and the receiver reports it to that database, and it automatically matches everything up. So you've kind of got a semi-real-time traceability database for hog movements in Canada. And it was an industry coming together thing. Now, I would say the people in that industry who use our software, it's all automated and all the movements get reported to PigTrace automatically. But even if you need to go in there and just key it in, if you're just a small, colony and you're shipping so many hogs a year kind of thing, that facility exists, and it was an industry sponsor and an industry kind of coming together and solving that problem proactively prior to regulation kind of thing. And I think that opportunity exists in this industry too.
Chris, Rod made a question earlier about, or made a comment earlier about, how many people in this room wish, your sidewalls were higher, things like that. And as we talk about future proofing, what's one piece of advice you'd have before we do our Q&A for how people in this room can, really future-proof their operations as we see a lot of this technological change, AI and things like that? What's your big piece of advice for how you can look ahead?
I mean, looking around this room, I see a lot more experience in here than I could possibly offer. So it seems a little backwards to me to be offering advice to people who have not just experienced changed, but driven it forward. The only thing I could say is just to ask questions and maybe slow things down. There's so much information out there and almost too much misinformation, whether it's deliberate or not. Sometimes people don't know that they're spreading misinformation. Sometimes it's good to just slow things down and look at options. There's not just one bank for a reason, for example. There's lots of options out there with lots of different offerings, and there's nuances between each of these things. So yeah, I guess just ask questions and be open to the answers that come. Change isn't always easy, and it's not always something that we look forward to, but there are benefits. There's always going to be pitfalls, but there are also lots of benefits. So ask questions and be open to the answers and be willing to explore things.
I'll kick off our Q&A. I have a question about AI. Is it really going to solve all of our problems? Because I keep hearing that AI can do everything, but I imagine that's not the case. There's probably a lot of myths and misconceptions in that regard as well. So I'll just throw that out to any of you. Rod, you want?
I think I know it confuses me what this AI thing is, right? And I think each of us should probably have our own definition of understanding of what it is. The two of us are color sorters, and the brochures say, well, it has AI. The Kimbria brand is called Brain. We kind of played on the AI in the word brain. And it's really cool. Is it really AI? I'm not sure. You need to tell the machine, this is good seed, that's bad seed, and it thinks and it makes a decision, and the results are amazing. If that's AI, then I think that's really great, but I don't know what my definition of it potentially is. We have a term, we call it Bob AI. Bob's our sorter technician. And Bob can come and ask you some questions saying, hey, what do you want to do? And then create some buttons saying, yes, do more, no, do less. And it's pulling the levers for you to make smart decisions, but trying to limit it to as few buttons or clicks as possible. So a lot of different layers of it, I think. If AI can get us in color sorters to a point where there's one button that says perfect, I think we could sell the crap out of that. But we're not quite there. We're not too many buttons away from that. But
Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I don't know what kind of software you guys have in your color sources, but I would imagine it's what we would call heuristics, right? It's a bunch of rules, if this, do this kind of thing, right? So if this color, if this light coming back looks like this, go this way versus go that way kind of stuff, right?
It's definitely an interpolating DDM, data-driven model, and there's lots of different kinds of AIs. Siri or Alexa, that's technically a form of an AI with it's a neural network. You've got large language models like ChatGPT as well. That's technically.
Are you guys using neural networks in your color sorters, or is it all heuristics?
Yeah. So we've got the heuristics model, we've got a DDM, and then we've also got machine learning in it, which is another form of, I guess it's a tool for an AI. It's not an AI on its own in a sense. So it doesn't just take this data on the color sorter in particular, Bueller. It doesn't just take what you say is good and bad, spit out an algorithm with all your variables, whether it's dummy variables or multivariate data, creating a variable in this algorithm. It takes that, interpolates, it spits out a model and said, hey, this is what I think is good and this is what I think is bad. Because, all right, someone tell me, what does wheat look like? Depends. Variety, the field, the year, is it heated or not? There's so many variables that you can't just say, this is good and this is bad. But what that Bueller model does is it goes to the next step with that machine learning, and based on the data that it's already processed, and then how we as operators respond to that data by saying, oh, actually you're taking out this grain when it's just bleached, but it's still good. There's nothing wrong with it other than the color's a little bit off. But maybe that looks a little bit too close to something like Fusarium. Still good grain. It takes that input, reorganizes that algorithm, and then continues to process, even though we don't actually have to change any inputs anymore. It does it on its own. And that's that machine learning. And then there's even things like deep machine learning, which instead of talking about, tens to maybe hundreds of variables, we're talking up to thousands or tens of thousands of variables. And of course, there's a lot of processing power that's required to be able to use these kinds of models. So then your energy consumption just goes through the roof. I'm sure people have heard about, how much energy it takes to produce a single Bitcoin now. Whereas, 20 years ago, it was, I could just do it on my phone. I could have mined 6 Bitcoins in this time 20 years ago. Now I wouldn't even get a millionth of one in terms of processing power.
Yeah, things are changing quick. Arlin, do you have some?
Yeah, echoing what was said by some of the others here, AI has become this generic buzzword. And whenever I get asked that, I guess the question back at you is, what is AI to you? What does that mean? Does it mean machines making decisions without human intervention? Well, any of you with automation, your seed plants already have a form of AI then by that definition. Now, to what degree is it? Are we talking, a conveyor shuts off when the surge hopper goes high? That's pretty basic. But if it comes down to, adjusting speeds of equipment based on specific levels within surge hoppers, where it's now self-analyzing variables within the plant and making decisions based upon it, that's already here. That's already present. Where our challenge, though, as echoed in previous questions, is getting the various systems to talk to each other. So what I'm running in terms of a form of AI is kind of its own little isolated bubble versus what's happening on Cleaner over here in its own little bubble. And the next evolution will be to get those bubbles to intersect, and how can they work together for the greater of the processing floor.
Thank you, Arlin. I want to stay on time, but we have a couple of minutes. Do we have a question from the floor? Anybody want to ask these guys anything? Show of hands. Anybody put your hand up if there's anything that comes to mind. It's a good opportunity, but they will be around all day, and so feel free to come and talk to them at any time. So, well, thank you, everybody, and want to thank our panelists here. If we could have a round of applause for all of them, please.